Okay, so we are live now. Thank you very much. This is our presentation at Open Lake Project. Our guest speaker is Cassie Matthews, and our professor, the research professor, is Asade Bosogi, Dr. Asade Bosogi. She is professor in electrical engineering and is helping us with the organization here with the project. And Dr. Bosogi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Cassie Matthews. Cassie has worked in the access technology field since the mid-1990s. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology from the University of Phoenix and the Florida Division of Blind Services Access Technology Endorsement. He's also Microsoft certified professional. Cassie is the founder of webfriendlyhelp.com, where he provides cutting-edge technical training and support, virtual assistance, and audio editing. In addition, Cassie has worked with the VECO as an accessibility specialist since 2016. Cassie was an access technology specialist with Lighthouse Central Florida from 2007 to 2020. Cassie was also instrumental in the founding of a Guide Dogs for the Blind Technology Alumni Chapter in 2011. He's highly committed to changing lives through technology. He enjoys testing new devices and software and remains informed about new technical developments in this ever-changing field. With this introduction, I ask Cassie to please take the floor and tell us about his magnificent life experiences.
Well, thank you so much. I definitely appreciate that great intro, and I appreciate the opportunity of being here. The really purpose of my talk today is to try to illustrate the benefits of technology and accessibility, not just for people with disabilities, but for everybody. And I'm going to do that through some stories, some anecdotes, and things like that. So I'll start out and kind of talk a little bit about my life, and then we'll go on with the rest of the information that I have. So I started out. I've always been visually impaired. I had enough vision, I always say, to be dangerous. And I had vision in one eye, and then I lost that when I was 13. So because of that, technology has always been a big equalizer for me in terms of my philosophy has always been the more I can do with technology, the better it makes my independence, and the more efficient I am at getting things done. So that was the case in school, in high school, and in college, especially because I did all of my training, all of my schooling in online. So as my degree is in information technology from the University of Phoenix, some of you may know that's a school that you can take your courses entirely online, and that was crucial for me because all of my textbooks were accessible. So I didn't have to do anything special to get those books in a readable form. They were just available to me as part of the course platform. I started out not knowing anything about computers, not knowing that they could talk through the use of screen reader technology, which I will talk about that later. But when I found out that a computer could talk, this was late high school for me, that was a huge game changer for me. We never know when disability could strike, even if it's temporary. And so this is partly why, accessibility is so important. Any one of us could, have a fall and break a hand, break an arm, or, have to have some rehabilitation, which would stop us from doing our normal tasks, in the way that we're used to. And so having multiple ways of accessing information is, can be a crucial way of keeping your productivity up and, just keeping your efficiency up just in your daily life and also in your typical workload. What happened in the case of JAWS, for example, is a great example of that. Ted Henter, which some of you may know or may not know, was suddenly in a motorcycle accident and lost his vision, both eyes. And fortunately for him and everybody else, he had a software engineering background, and he developed a screen reader we all know today as JAWS, Job Access with Speech. And because he was visually impaired and because he was blind himself, he was really in a unique position to make this the best screen reader that it could be. And thousands of people have benefited from his work making that accessible. So a screen reader, essentially what it will do is it will read what is on the computer. As you move around through menus and things like that, the screen reader follows along and reads what is on the screen. You control it through keyboard commands, and it really allows a blind person to use a computer. So that's just a short nutshell, introduction to what a screen reader is. But this Ted Henter, he developed this screen reading technology. He wasn't the first, but he developed JAWS, which is probably one of the most famous screen readers out there today. Been out since the 90s, early 90s, and 93, if I remember exactly. So he's just enabled millions of people probably to get to work and use a computer and have fulfilling lives. Fast forward to 2006, a couple of blind programmers were wanting to provide screen reading technology to people that couldn't afford the cost of screen reading technology. At the time, screen readers for Windows were around $1,000, and that translates to higher amounts in other countries. And so Mike Curran and Jamie Tay developed what's called Nvda, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. And the difference is this one provides a technology that is open source, so anybody who can code can make changes to the program. So this goes an extra step in providing accessibility, because you don't have to wait for a corporation to make changes. Anybody can make changes to the screen reader and fix things, make improvements, etc. So these technologies have just been revolutionary, in just getting people the technology that they need to use a computer, or even a smartphone. Screen reading technology is built into those devices as well. And it allows people to work. It allows, in my case, I run my business, as was said in the introduction. I could not run my business without my screen reading technology. And accessibility really goes beyond that. Anybody, most of you have heard of Siri. That started out as an accessibility platform to help people with low vision or no vision and also to help drivers text without looking at the screen. And it turns out, I think Apple gets, if I remember correctly, Apple gets about 2 billion Siri requests per day. So that's not just for accessibility, but it enhances everybody who uses Siri. So that's just an example there. Another thing that we don't typically think of is how many of you carry your luggage through the airport. Nobody does that anymore. Why? Because there are wheels on the bottom of suitcases now. This is one of those things where you think, oh, why didn't I think of that, right? But the truth is, this is a huge accessibility benefit for everybody, because it just dramatically increases your flexibility in the airport, or if you're traveling, it just makes things so much easier. So that is a couple of examples there of how accessibility can, just make everybody's life more easy and more efficient. As I mentioned, in my case, I do run a business called Web Friendly Help, and I would not be able to do that if there were accessibility pieces involved in that. So we have already talked about the screen reader, but part of that is also web design. The web components have to be accessible. Databases have to be accessible. And so in accessibility terms, what I mean by that is it must be usable by people with disabilities, but that could be keyboard access, that could be hotkeys for different things. There's a lot of things that go into it, but it essentially allows someone who is using a device in a non-standard way, in other words, without needing to use a mouse, because that's the standard interface driver. And that allows somebody to use a device in a non-standard way to get things done. And so these are some of the things that really can make the difference between somebody, say, being able to run a business or do a job, or look for work or go to college, whatever the case may be. As I said, I did not know computers could talk, and so that was a huge game changer. Accessibility on the mobile platforms is another huge one for me. We a lot of times take for granted the fact that scanning technology has gotten so much better. I use my phone on a regular basis, for example, to scan and read mail, money, all these things that most of us, if we don't have a disability, just sort of take for granted. You walk out to the mailbox, you grab your mail, you read it, you throw away 95% of it because it's junk, and you go through your mail. But for someone with, in my case, a visual impairment, these tasks, they are doable, but they have to be done in a different way. And so, in my case, I will get any number of phone apps that can scan and read those kind of things, and go through the mail, whatever the case may be. There are just so many examples of technology just really improving things in so many different ways, and companies are beginning to realize this and make changes, make accessibility changes, and so this is kind of where I have come into it, because what will benefit me as a visually impaired person will benefit somebody else, and you know, more than likely. So I started my business with that in mind, and have, you know, started you know, offering services to help people use this technology, and none of it would be possible without accessible, you know, browsers and screen reading technology, and those kind of things, and they all work together. So my sorry, my headset was acting funny. So that's my I guess intro to all of this. I think I would like to, you know, open the floor for any questions or any feedback that anybody has at this point.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So what do you think is, you know, for someone that I guess that is listening to you, what do people need to do to better understand what you know, what people with visually impaired would need, and what we can do to help you, let's say in your business? You know, like what do you think it's something that you lack, or that you need from people in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to say the biggest thing that would probably go the longest way is to assume that whatever it is can be done. What I mean by that is society has, you know, a huge fear of blindness in general, and because of that, a lot of times people will, you know, encounter a blind person or a visually impaired person or just anybody with any kind of disability and automatically just, you know, kind of assume that whatever it is cannot be done, or it's too difficult to be done. Whether that's a job, whether that's, you know, maybe going to school, maybe that's, you know, whatever the case may be. A lot of times the assumption is that it's too hard, or that it can't be done. And that is a barrier to a lot of, you know, progress and potential. So I think that would be the number one thing, is just assume that it can be done, and go into an encounter with that, you know, in mind. And because so much more can be accomplished when the assumption is it can be done, we just have to figure out how, or we just have to ask questions. You know, and along with that, of course, communication, because the person with the disability is going to know or have a really good idea about how to address, you know, whatever questions you have. You know, like they say, the only stupid question is the one not asked. You know, so you know, most are open to that. Most people with disabilities are open to questions. So that's probably the first thing. The rest of it is all details that really, you know, can be worked out. It depends on the problem. It depends on the issue that's trying to be solved. But the rest are just details that can generally be worked out. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it did, and thank you. I mean, I honestly didn't know that there are so many things that are helpful in technology right now. And listening to this, it's very insightful, because, like you said, it sort of opened a window to somebody that, you know, absolutely doesn't know what it's like, or doesn't even understand. So I think it's great to know, and to know that there's ways, and to figure out, okay, like you said, what questions should be asked in order to make it better, or try to help in any way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia. Appreciate it.
I have a question. This is Judy, and I was wondering if you could give some examples of how someone can make their product accessible from the ground up, their business, or if they're doing something, an app or on the web, or just some different things, considerations to keep in mind, whether for like a physical business or for some, somebody or something virtual, some considerations for making it fully accessible.
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I would say is include people with disabilities in the design process. You know, they are going to either be able to provide ongoing feedback, or they will know who to contact if they don't have the knowledge, you know, themselves to give you, you know, concrete guidelines. But aside from that, you know, regardless of what you're doing, there's guidelines for physical, you know, accessibility. There's guidelines for web accessibility. There's guidelines for app accessibility, and most of the platforms, you know, Android and Apple, have accessible, you know, documentation that talks about how to make things accessible. So all of these documents are available, and it is a lot of stuff to wade through. So it might be of benefit to consult a organization that specializes in, you know, making those accessibility decisions. And and I will say too, it's so much better to do it from the ground up. Um, yeah, a lot of places, knowingly or unknowingly, will make the mistake of you know, kind of bolting it in at the last minute or toward the end or after it's already, you know, been designed. So um, you know, I think those are the first things I would say is include people with disabilities, but include, you know, make accessibility as part of the initial design process. And you know, you will find that it will be usable more to more people than just the demographic that you target. So as an example, you know, you might say, I'm going to make sure this thing is accessible to someone who has a visual impairment, but you may find out that someone who is deafblind also will benefit, or you may find out that, you know, people are benefiting from that in ways that you never anticipated in a good way. So yeah, just start with that, include people with disabilities, and design for accessibility from the beginning.
Thank you.
This is Homero. What is like the most challenging things that you have to face in your daily life in terms of accessibility, for example, in the cities or in the daily life? What do you think that could be improved?
Oh wow, what a good question. I think for myself, one of the biggest hurdles is navigation in terms of indoor navigation. So I'll give an example. GPS apps allow people to navigate, and it allows me to, you know, go from, let's say, my home to the grocery store. Um, and getting there is generally not too much of an issue. You know, GPS makes that pretty easy. Um, but then once you get there, getting into a building, finding the door, you're on the street, finding where exactly that door is, what path do you have to take to get there? We don't have technology for that quite yet. It's being worked on. It's getting there. And then, of course, you know, once you get into the building, what do you do from there? You know, say you want to go to the restroom, where's that? You know, say you want to go to the you know, ticket counter, where is that? And of course, you know, you can ask people, And a lot of people, even if they don't have a disability, will ask people. And a lot of times what will happen is the person will just say, oh, it's, right over there. And so for me as a completely, blind individual, that's not true, that's not really helpful. And so sometimes people will, walk with me, but the the goal really would be to have technology be in place in such a way that I could just find out where those things are on my own without necessarily having to ask, unless I, wanted to for some reason. But I think for me, that's probably the biggest issue that I face on a regular, regular basis. And I think the next probably for me would probably be paper in terms of when in other companies or other entities want me to sign something on a piece of paper. And some government agencies are like this. They will only accept an actual physical, signature. So those things are difficult for me because there's not an easy way to make that happen. There's ways of getting around it, but it's not as easy as, let's say, a digital signature where you go to like DocuSign and just check a couple of boxes, hit a few buttons on the screen, and your document is signed. And so things like that. Those two things are probably my biggest, accessibility, issues that I face on a regular basis.
This is Judy again. I was wondering if you if you could talk a little bit about something that you think would doesn't exist now, that would change, that would kind of level the playing field for someone with a disability. I know you've given a little bit of like this, like with your answer now, but is there something that, like, say, doesn't exist that would allow somebody to complete their course of study with ease, or do enter a field of work that maybe they wouldn't be able to now because the technology doesn't exist? Are there one or two things that you could think of that would change the world in that way?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the first thing that actually came to mind is the if we had something like the visor on Star Trek. I don't know if anybody out there is a Star Trek fan, but the chief engineer on Star Trek was completely blind, but he had a visor over his eyes that allowed him to, function, and it directly communicated with his nervous system, to make that happen. Of course, we're not there yet, but something like that would be huge. For me, obviously, the guy, the engineer in Star Trek, he was able to run, he was able to walk, he was able to do whatever he had to do, and with no difficulties, because of that little piece of technology on his head. So, if we had something like that, that would be amazing. More in the short term, I would say, again, technology in itself is just a huge equalizer for a lot of people, especially nowadays. And I think artificial intelligence is really going to start kind of playing a role. If there is some artificial intelligence that could kind of help ease those things, for example, if there is some augmented reality option that would help point out, like I was talking about earlier, where are the bathrooms, and if I could ask, Siri or some other phone system, hey, I need to find the service desk or whatever. It'd be great if the assistant could scan the room and, kind of lay out a path for me, something like that. And everybody with a disability is going to have a different need. So, of course, somebody in a wheelchair may not need that, of course, because they can see and they can move. They may need something else. So, to me, that's kind of what the interesting thing about artificial intelligence is it can learn and improve, and it's customizable to a large degree, and it's just going to get better. So that's just kind of my off the top answer, I guess, but it's a great question, Judy. Thank you.
Sure. And what about is there something that comes to mind that would change things with technology that already exists, like that, if somebody were to start developing it next week, and it can be something super simple, but that you think would change the way someone is able to do something?
Oh boy. Well, nothing. Unfortunately, nothing really comes to mind. I think the closest thing I would probably come up with on that would be the AR glasses that are being developed. So AR is the augmented reality glasses that are coming out. I think if those are done right, it's rumored that Apple's going to have something like that in 2022 or 2023. That would be potentially a huge win. Especially for somebody with a visual disability, I could use those glasses for all kinds of things because they would have intelligence built into them. So that would be a huge thing. I think the next thing probably on the horizon that I would immediately think of is driverless cars. So we've all heard about driverless cars, in the future. And, it seems like every time we hear about them, they get, pushed back and everything else. But that has the potential to really change, all our lives really, but especially people with disabilities, because a lot of people with disabilities can't drive, for one reason or another. And although we have ride sharing solutions now, it's still not quite as convenient as what could be if you could just get into a car and go somewhere, and without having to worry about, oh, I need to find a driver and I need to make sure the driver knows about service animals or something like that. The idea of just being able to get into a car and go somewhere, that on the near horizon, would be a big boost and big game changer for a lot of people with disabilities. So that's just kind of my off the top answer. So I hope that's insightful.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you were talking about service animals, and it made me think that I think that I've read somewhere that they're working on robotic guide dogs. So I don't know if I'd want one, but I'd prefer the real one. But I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, if anybody's out there listening, I'd be happy to test a robot dog. So just saying.
Cassie, this is Azadeh. You talked about augmented reality glasses, that they are working on it. Forgive my ignorance, but as far as I knew, what they are thinking is taking advantage of intelligence and hardware still for the benefit of making things easier for people that can see it. I don't know how that technology can be used by individuals who have a visual, impairment. So if you know anything about that, please tell us.
Sure, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'll give you a quick example. Apple right now has a camera app, and most people, of course, use it for taking videos and taking pictures. However, Apple has built in technology for people with visual impairments. And if you turn it on, this technology will recognize objects in real, in space, in 3 dimensions. It will recognize text. So in other words, most people will take their camera, for example, and you've heard of, they will take the camera and aim it at something and have it translated. So if you aim your camera at a sign, for example, it might translate that sign into Spanish or German or something. The same kind of technology can, and it already is working on an iPhone. So if you take your camera and you turn on the accessible, recognition, technology, you can move your camera around the room and it will say, things like, couch on a brown carpet, or, it might say table in front of a window, things like that. And if you aim the camera at text, it will recognize the text, or if it's a phone number, it will allow you to call that phone number. So what this is doing essentially is using augmented reality technology and artificial intelligence already just in the camera app. So if you take that to the next level and you take glasses, these glasses would already have a camera built in, and they would probably at least initially be tied to your smartphone, your iPhone, in Apple's case, for the major processing power. And so essentially you would be able to either call up OCR, which means optical character recognition. So if there's text that you're looking at, it could say the name of the building that you're looking at. It could say, the name of the object that you're looking at, or the make of a car, whatever it happens to be. This is already starting to be done in even GPS apps. So Google and Apple, both, if you use your GPS app, a lot of the times now you can aim your camera at, along the street, and it will pick out landmarks and give you an even more precise location of where you are on the map, and also give you more precise directions based on where you are, not just on a GPS approximation. So this is sort of where this is going, and that's kind of how the technology works at a high level. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Casey, does that sort of, can you talk a little bit about the Envisioned Glasses? And are they kind of doing some of that already? And what are they not doing?
Yeah, so the Envisioned Glasses, for those who may not be familiar, they are glasses, and I think, I don't remember if they were discontinued or not, but the Envisioned Glasses were, or are, glasses that have, they're tied to your phone, and they use a blindness specific app called Envision AI. And this app allows you to, as a visually impaired person, it allows you to scan images and have them recognized. So for example, talking about reading mail, physical paper documents, it will allow you to scan that and have it read back. It will let you read objects, like, looking for a couch, or looking for a window or something like that. And it will let you read currency and different things like that. So what they did with Envision is they took the app and actually put it into a set of glasses with some intelligence built in. So the glasses themselves have, I think it was bone conduction speakers, or just a little small speaker on the side. And the glasses also had a camera. And so you could hit some buttons on the glasses that would activate different things, like, optical character recognition for text reading, or you could do different things. You could talk to the glasses and say, read text, or different things like that. I never had the glasses myself, so this is all stuff that I've read about or seen demonstrated um, on YouTube. So these are highly specialized glasses. I want to say they were around $2,000, so they were pretty expensive, which part of the reason I didn't have one. But the flexibility, the hands-free accessibility was a big win, for a lot of people, because if I'm going to read something on my phone, I have to hover the phone over the item and hold it still. And some people have a hard time with that. But with glasses, it's hands-free, so you can be doing something else, or you can just, it's usually, not always, but it's usually easier to hold your head still than it is your hands. And especially if somebody has a disability where they have issues holding their hands still, those can be that can be an issue for some people. So it's kind of long-winded, but I hope it helps.
For sure. Thank you.
Cassie, this is Homero. How important do you think is Braille for a person who's studying any subject in college, like, for example, information technology?
Braille is a huge piece of it. Unfortunately for me, I lost my vision later in life, and well, not too late, but late enough that I wasn't raised in it. And so I didn't grow up learning and reading Braille as efficiently as I could have if I had put the time in. And that's to my detriment. I have personally witnessed people using Braille on the job, and reading things, and they are a lot more efficient than just somebody using speech. You'll especially find this in the financial fields, or a lot of times in programming, coding, computer coding, those sort of things. Those are really where a Braille reader can really fly through the information. And in some cases, a Braille user, especially using screen reading technology with a computer, can actually get to things on the screen that are not as accessible if you're not using Braille. So those are just some really quick things. The other really useful thing about Braille is it helps you to know which bathroom you're going into. So I'll leave it at that.
Do you think that Braille is important also for like math, to do math?
Oh yeah, that's a great observation. Braille is huge for math, especially if you're doing long calculations and long algebra and things like that. Math is not my specialty, but I have talked to people that Braille is a huge benefit. If you're a proficient Braille user, and if you are able to read it proficiently, then that can be a huge benefit. And it's not to say that it can't be done without Braille, but Braille is definitely an enhancer, and can really make things a lot more efficient, if the person will take the time and really get proficient with the Braille.
Do you think that maybe having some Braille inscriptions in things like canned food, for example, to know what is the product and the date of expiry date is like something important, would be helpful, because I was talking to a person who works in the canned food industry, and I'm trying to convince them that putting like a label, for example, tomatoes or soup, and putting the date, expiration date is important. Do you think that that could be an important thing to have in the grocery store?
Yeah, I think it is important. And I just, on a practical scale, my issue may be come down to expense. Unfortunately, Braille does tend to be expensive technology. And so that's not necessarily meant as a deterrent, but because of the Braille being so expensive, those sort of things could be a bit difficult to achieve, just because you're talking about something like an expiration date. It's not something that can just be stamped with a label and move on. Each product, could have a different expiration date, or each medication could have a different set of instructions. And so, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but unfortunately, the way that Braille technology is produced, that can be very expensive. And that is one of the innovations that I would like to see, is Braille, producing Braille technology. um, that kind of technology needs to come down in price. It needs to be mass produced so that it's easy to do for anybody who wants to produce Braille. But alongside with that, though, there are technologies that can deliver that information in other ways as well. So I am a lot of times able to scan a bottle, or scan, like, let's say, a carton of milk, and get the expiration date. It is sometimes a bit time consuming, but there are tags that can be placed on items that can also deliver that information. So for example, with the medical information, they call them NFC tags, near field communication is what it stands for. It's a low, short distance radio frequency communication, and that can communicate vital medical information to somebody's smartphone, for example, and then they can read it on their Braille display if they have one, or they can listen to it. So those are kind of some of the options, for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would definitely love to see the cost of Braille producing come down, and the technology be a lot cheaper and easier to access.
This is Judy, and just sort of tagging onto that, there is, I love seeing places that have Braille in their products, and unfortunately there aren't very many. There is a store, they do like bath and beauty products. I don't know if it's L'Occitane, or I can't remember exactly the name, but I love that they have like their boxes labeled in Braille with whatever the product is. And so I think just starting with a label would be awesome. Even if they can include something like the expiration date, which changes so much. Shoot, I would love to see even something like, just the name of the product somehow. That would be awesome.
Hello, this is Amir. I had a question for you, Casey. I hope you're having a good night. And if you were in the university setting, do you think outreach through a group such as Open Light Project, reaching out and contacting you, inviting you to participate in events like this one, would help you feel more comfortable in the university, make you feel more welcome? How can we create a setting where the visually impaired individuals can discuss ways, suggestions on how we can improve the university experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to say, probably coming at it from the point of the disability being a strength, and not something to necessarily cure or fix. And the reason I say that is I worked for a company not too long ago, a week ago, and they specialize in making websites and apps accessible. And that was their motto: is your disability is a strength. You as someone, as a person with a disability, you approach problem solving in a different way. You see things differently. You look at problems differently than somebody that doesn't have a disability. So if I was studying something like that, I would look at it like that and kind of see about putting that message out there. Is we want people with disabilities. We want to help make things equal access, and we want you as someone with a disability to come help us with that, because you offer a strength that we may not have. So it's sort of a role reversal, if you think about it that way, because someone without a disability isn't going to come at these solutions in the same way as a person with a disability would. So in that sense, someone with a disability, in this case, has a bit of an advantage. And so that's kind of the message that if I was starting, I would be trying to communicate that.
Okay, so we're reaching out because we want you to participate, and we need your strengths to really make this worthwhile and become the program that we'd like it to be.
Correct. Yep, you got it.
Thank you.
And I saw the chat about the clothing, the garments that were providing accessibility. I think that's a very interesting thing. It's something I've been kind of following off and on. There have been various companies that have tried to address that, and some companies have gotten further along in their efforts, than others. And so it's something that I'm definitely watching as just somebody on the consumer level, just looking into maybe getting something like that. So I appreciate throwing that in there. It's definitely something I'm watching. So thank you for that.
So this is Judy again, and I just have maybe one more question. If you could give advice to current engineering students developing products or wanting to make the world more accessible, I know you've mentioned some things. Is there anything else that you would share to kind of as encouragement or advice to them? Because I think that engineering students are a huge part of the future, and like there's going to be so much so much potential and so much that can be developed, and so much that maybe hasn't even been thought of. So I just wonder what you would say to someone or a group of people who are trying to make the world more accessible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would just say, if you as an engineering student or in the engineering field, if you have a dream, in your heart to make something better or make something more accessible, I think the first thing I would say is just don't give up, because even if you're developing a product that doesn't require accessibility, that is still a process that has to be, navigated. How many times did did it take to make the first light bulb? And that wasn't even anything related to accessibility. So there's more consideration with accessibility, but there's also more impact for people that are going to use that technology, and again, some people that you may not even think would benefit. And I'll say, a lot of people, when the iPhones first came out, the idea was that they're just not going to be accessible. We kind of take it for granted today, a lot of us, that iPhones are accessible, but when they first came out, they were not usable, by and large with people that had a disability. You think about it, you have a piece of glass that doesn't talk. So for me, that's just, there's no buttons to push. There's nothing to feel, and it's not going to talk to me and tell me what I'm pressing. So it's just not going to work. And it wasn't until Apple decided to change it and make it accessible that it became usable. And today it's my go-to tool for so many different things. Because engineers made it happen. So what may appear to be completely unusable, has has a tendency to change, and people put their minds to it and really work on something. So I would just leave you with that, and don't give up. Don't give up, because you could end up changing the world for countless people. So.
Yeah, I was one of those people that didn't think iPhones were accessible even when they could talk. I was very used to things with buttons. I loved my flip phone. I couldn't imagine using a flat piece of glass. So I totally can relate to that. Sometimes it's not only convincing, sometimes it's convincing the very people that you're trying to help. So yeah, it's good that my husband didn't give up and convinced me that that an iPhone would change my life, because it has. But I certainly needed to come around. So.
So Cassie, we got this message, Homero got this message from YouTube people. So the student said that he or she is a UCF student. I think this is regarding the previous message, Homero. So the student said that the senior design relates to the topic, and he or she would love to hear if you have any feedback on this project. Have you already read the previous message regarding the project, or you want me to read that? About the garment that they are developing a garment to assist visually impaired individuals to navigate the world using a system of sensors and feedback. And they want to hear your thought and feedback on this project, I guess.
Well, I would just say, from what I know about this kind of project, it would help me a lot in especially obstacle detection and detection of physical objects in the world as I'm walking. So my understanding of it, at least at this point, is the basic prototype would allow me to identify things like maybe overhangs, doorways, potentially stairways, potentially, and various things that I may come across, especially if there's something that I have that I might run into or might block my path. So this kind of thing would be really useful. Also, my understanding is there are some navigational aids that could be potentially built into these devices. Anything from GPS to indoor navigation is kind of on the table. Yeah, and so any of that would be of huge usefulness for me as a visually impaired person. So I'm very interested, and I'm always looking for more developments on that.
Thank you. Do we have any other question for our great speaker?
There is a question from YouTube.
Okay.
She says, it's in Spanish, so I have to translate. Do you think that it is important to do like awareness, to spread awareness in the schools, like high schools or like universities, to do like inclusion?
Yeah, I think awareness is huge, especially in the engineering field. So the reason I say this is because a lot of times, let's say you take a computer programming class, a lot of the times the accessibility component is not part of that class. So how do you make your program keyboard accessible? How do you make your program that is usable and accessible to someone that is using a screen reader? How do you make your program or website work with somebody that is using speech recognition? Maybe they can't type, maybe they can't use their keyboard at all. How do you design for, universal design is what they call it, but how do you do that in a practical way? So they've got all kinds of coding techniques and how to optimize memory and all this, all that's important. But then you've got a group of engineers that don't know about accessibility, and they have to learn it later in life. And sometimes unlearning bad behavior is harder than learning new behavior. So I think awareness, especially in the early parts of an engineering career, is huge. It's just like what I was saying about including accessibility in the design phase. It's just as important to have accessibility training in the early stages of somebody's career. So I think that's huge.
This is my personal opinion. I think, I try to imagine myself as a student. I think what would have great impact on me in terms of awareness is to hear from somebody like you. I think it would be very useful if we can create a way that people like you and Judy can directly communicate with engineering students in their first year, so they get to learn about these things and that help them. Something that, as you said, if you learn early on, it will stick in your mind
Mhm.
rather than, being exposed to it later on, even as the senior design project. But
Right.
again, that we at the university, we would love to host you and to facilitate such a communication, but it would require big, commitment from you, and people like you, if you would be interested, to enlighten us engineers that we don't know about many of the difficulties that you have to go through. So I think it would be more effective if we all hear directly from people like you, rather than, for instance, a person like me or Homiro go around and try to, bring that awareness. So we can play the role of that facilitator to bring you to the university, not necessarily physically like tonight program online,
Mhm.
but to make that bridge so you get connected to the engineers, and they get to know you and hear these things from you. So I really hope that this initiative that Homiro has started would get expanded, and we can have more wonderful speakers like yourself that can speak to us about your experiences. And we all have a lot to learn from you. Yeah, personally, I think as engineers, if we want to make any changes, we first need to understand what the problem is. And
Mhm.
you would be the best people to tell us what the problem is, so then we can start, thinking and hopefully coming up with good solution. Well, thank you very much. Homiro, do we have any other question for our great speaker?
I just wanted to say, thank you for organizing this event, and thank you, Casey and Judy, for taking the time and being here. Like, it really is a big awareness for somebody that, it doesn't know or doesn't really understand, what it's like, or what we need to do. And through this, we really are able to see like a window of what we need to do and what questions we need to ask. And thank you for the opportunity. And it's also, an inspiration to see all the things that you've accomplished, for a normal person, as well for somebody that's visually impaired, just to see that, that anything is possible, no matter what it is, whether you have everything or not. Just, you have all the capabilities if you really want to do it. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you. I appreciate the time and appreciate being able to be here and talk to you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was a wonderful talk. We got a lot of important insight. I want to thank you for your time and your knowledge. Thank you very much, Cassie and Judy. It was a wonderful night, and I hope that we will keep in touch and getting more information and more knowledge from you.
That'd be great. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Have a
You're
good night.
welcome.
Hope you have a good night.
Good
Good night,
night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.